Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where I document fixing up our 1910 home. Today we're starting in the office. I use this as a home office. It was originally labeled as the living room in the original house plans. It had been wallpapered at some point on top of the original plaster and then painted on top of the wallpaper. So it was starting to bubble a little bit and I just couldn't look at it anymore. So one day I just started ripping that wallpaper off. It kind of came off in two sheets, really. The first layer was the artwork layer of the wallpaper, so that came off pretty easily. But then the tan stuff you see here is the glue side of the wallpaper, so that one took a little bit of warm water and some elbow grease. A few days, I would say a couple hours a day for a few days, just scraping that off by hand. But it came off pretty good, and you can see some white stuff here where the people at some point in the past had patched some cracks with probably just spackle or drywall compound or something. So those have been holding up pretty good. The cracks actually weren't that bad. None of it had come loose from the backboard, so we really just had to fill those and kind of just get them flat again. Overall, the plaster was looking pretty good considering how old. There's some movement. We're on a main street with some heavy truck traffic, so there's obviously some movement and settlement in the house, which is why I think the cracks were worse toward the front of the room. After I took off the wallpaper, I spent some time scraping off loose paint bits and just extra glue and just odds and ends that were stuck to the walls over the time. We decided not to, I'm sure that there's some lead-based paint here, and we just decided not to incur the expense of having it abated and removed. So we're just going to paint over it and sort of encapsulate it for time. So I very carefully scraped off anything that was loose so that we can avoid having to sand too much here. There really wasn't that much that came loose though. I mean, this held up pretty well for 100 and some years. I think this tan color, this mauve color, is probably the original paint color. I think that lighter color you see here is probably whatever, the base coat, I guess, for the original paint. This was one of the worst cracks. This is above the mantle. And then this corner was between a door jamb and a turn in the wall, and they were super thorough with the wallpaper. There was wallpaper in this crack that I was trying to get out. A little challenging. That space is only like an inch wide, so I spent some time with my fingernails digging that stuff out so I could get it really flat and nice for a good surface to paint on when we finish painting. The white you see here that I'm scraping over is some of the old repair that people put into the plaster cracks before we moved in and before they wallpapered. I'm actually pretty amazed at how well that stuff stayed in the cracks. It held up pretty well. And I just had a few flakes and, loose bits to get out of there. But overall, I think it's going to stand up pretty well. For some of the more complicated and larger cracks, I bought this flexible patching compound. Since the plaster isn't really detached from the wall, we just needed to fill the cracks in and help them not get larger over time. So not a ton of content on this, but I did fill all the cracks around the room with that. And then we went over any rough spots that the flexible stuff is not actually sandable. It's more like a rubber material. So I went over those cracks that had been patched with regular spackle so that we could sand it down flat. And then I went over some of the spots where the paint had chipped out with more of the spackle so that we could try to get the surface as smooth as possible since we weren't stripping the paint all the way down. So I know this isn't maybe the most professional way to do it, but on a budget, this felt like at least a good try. So we'll see how it comes out. But we did spend probably a day, several hours one day and a couple hours another day, getting the walls as spackled as we could get them to patch all the little holes, nail holes over time, all the cracks, paint chipped out areas, spent some time around the edges of the room trying to get the paint flat where it had come loose from like the door jambs and the railing at the top. While I'm clearly not a professional spackler, I did find this project pretty satisfying. I have 2 art degrees. I love a hands-on project like this. We did do some work that was a little more like putting Bondo on a car to try to square up the corner over the mantle here. That was one of the bigger cracked areas. So hopefully that'll hold up enough to look tighter when it's painted and final. I did think it was kind of interesting that some of these cracks seem to be roughly the same height across several of the walls. So I don't know what that's about, if there's some really specific settling going on, or if this is just kind of common to 2 and 3 story houses of this age. I plan to do a little bit more digging on just how plaster wears and how to keep it up over time. I think while this was a really satisfying project to work on, I wouldn't love to do it again. So I'm hopeful that these sort of multi-layered repairs hold up for us for a while. Here you can see that a lot of the patchwork on this particular wall to the left of the mantle is actually just chip paint. So I don't know what the normal protocol here is. I guess it's just sanding and stripping the paint off, but I'm hopeful that we can get this spackle down to a level where it's not super noticeable, but also still fills in all the little dips that were in there. This particular wall had, I don't know, it seemed like maybe somebody had bumped into it a bunch of times. I'm not sure what used to be in this room. I think some of the neighbors in town have referred to it as the golf room. It had kind of a plaid wallpaper, like Scotland golfing sort of vibe going on. There were some prints on the wall of golfers. So I feel like maybe a little game room or an office or something. So I think it got some wear. I think this house was a bed and breakfast for like 20 years. So I'm sure this room was heavily trafficked in the guest spaces. In the end, we are ready to sand and probably paint soon after that. It's looking a little bit cheetah print right now. All the pink is dried, but this was a progress shot while we were still working on it. I'm thinking our next video is sanding and getting at least primer on, see how flat it looks, kind of the moment of truth to see if any of this is going to work out like I envision. I'm really excited to put this room back together though. It's been a little while. I've been living in kind of a construction zone that I did to myself, so this will be nice. Thanks for watching.